The air on the space station Xylos 7 was thick and warm, smelling of strange spices, machine oil, and too many different kinds of life forms packed into one place. Humans were still new to the galactic community, and they often felt like they were being watched and judged. Jin was used to this feeling. As a translator, her job was to stand between her own people and others, trying to make them understand each other. Right now, she was listening carefully to a tall, lizard-like Cathar merchant, her mind working to find the right words to make a deal work. Not far away, in the crowded main market, her younger brother Minute was having a much better time. He was a scientist who studied plants, and his eyes were wide with excitement at all the weird and wonderful things for sale. He looked at glowing fruits and strange flowers in pots, his face full of a happy curiosity that Jin often wished she still had. His smile disappeared when he heard a sharp cry. He turned and saw a Cathar lord, a big one named Torval, who was important and wore fine clothes. One of the smaller, worker-class aliens had tripped and dropped a tray of expensive drinks. The glass shattered, and the sticky liquid splashed onto Torval's shiny boots. Torval made a low, angry sound in his throat. Without a word, he struck the worker across the face with the back of his hand. The small alien fell to the floor with a whimper, clutching its face. Minute didn't think. He just moved. He stepped between the big Cathar and the worker, holding his hands up. "Hey," he said, his voice firm but calm. "That's enough. It was an accident." The crowd around them got very quiet. Torval looked down at Minute, his slitted eyes blinking slowly. He seemed more surprised than angry. That a human, a species he considered weak and young, would dare to tell him what to do was interesting. "It was clumsy," Torval hissed, his voice like stones grinding together. "It must be corrected." "You corrected it," Minute said, not backing down. "Now it's over." Torval took a step closer. "You defend this thing? You value its existence over my offended honor?" "I value not watching someone get hurt for a simple mistake," Minute replied. He was brave, but he didn't understand. He didn't know their rules. A cruel smile spread on Torval's face. This was no longer about the worker. This was about the human's insult. "You have stained my honor. My bloodline demands a response." He didn't shout or get ready to fight. Instead, he reached to his belt and drew two long, curved blades. The crowd gasped and took a step back. They knew what this meant. "I claim the right of the honor blades," Torval announced, his voice echoing in the silent market. It wasn't a brawl. It was a ceremony. A deadly one. Minute looked confused. He held up his empty hands. "I don't want to fight you." "It is not a fight," Torval said. "It is a balancing." Then he moved. He was incredibly fast for his size. Minute tried to duck, but he was a scientist, not a soldier. The first blade sliced through the air, and Minute stumbled back. The second blade found its mark. It was not a wild attack, it was a single, precise, and brutal motion. Minute fell to the cold floor, his hand pressed to his side, his eyes wide with shock and pain. It was at that moment Jin finally found her way through the crowd. She had felt a sudden sense of worry, a feeling that something was wrong. She pushed people aside and then she stopped, her blood turning to ice. She saw her brother on the ground. She saw the Cathar lord wiping his blade clean on a cloth. She ran to Minute, falling to her knees beside him. "Minute. No, no, no. Look at me. It's okay." She tried to stop the bleeding, her hands shaking. He looked up at her, his breathing shallow. "Jin. He was hurting," he couldn't finish. The light in his eyes faded, and his hand went limp in hers. Jin held him, her world shrinking to this terrible silence in the middle of the noisy station. Torval watched for a moment, then sheathed his blades. He looked down at Jin with cold, uninterested eyes. "The balance is restored," he stated, as if he had just settled a business deal. "The matter is concluded." He turned and walked away, his guards following him. The crowd began to move again, conversation starting up in hushed tones. Life went on. For the Cathar, it was over. The books were balanced. But for Jin, holding her brother's body, her clothes stained with his blood, the matter was not concluded. It had only just begun. A deep, cold fire ignited in her chest, burning away her grief and leaving behind something much harder. The official report was a cold, sterile thing. It used words like regrettable incident, cultural misunderstanding, and lawful exercise of traditional rights. To Jin, sitting in the stark white office of the human embassy, the words blurred on the screen. They didn't describe her brother's laugh, or his curiosity, or the way he had looked at her, scared, in his final moments. They described a problem, and problems were to be managed. The ambassador, a kind-faced man named Mr. Davis, sighed and leaned back in his chair. Jin, you have to understand their perspective. To the Cathar, this wasn't murder. It was a legal ceremony. A matter of honor. Jin didn't look up from the screen. His honor was worth more than Min's life. It's not that simple, Mr. Davis said gently. Their entire society is built on this code. If we demand justice, our kind of justice, we risk a diplomatic disaster. The Cathar Imperium is powerful. We are new here. We cannot fight them. Who is asking to fight? Jin's voice was flat, empty. Every formal complaint we have filed has been rejected, Mr. Davis continued, gesturing to the screen. The Galactic Council acknowledges the tragedy but affirms the Cathar's right to uphold their traditions within their own cultural spaces. They have offered a payment. A compensation for your loss. The word compensation hung in the air like a bad smell. Jin finally looked up. Her eyes were dry, but a deep, cold fire burned behind them. They are offering to pay for my brother? It is their way of showing regret without admitting fault, Mr. Davis explained, looking uncomfortable. Jin stood up. Keep their money. She turned and walked out of the office. The door hissed shut behind her, cutting off Mr. Davis's plea for her to be reasonable. 4 days, Jin did nothing. She sat in her small room on the station, the silence pressing in on her. The grief was a physical weight, a stone in her stomach. But slowly, another feeling began to grow around it, hard and sharp. It was not sadness. It was not even anger anymore. It was a cold, clear purpose. They thought the matter was concluded. They thought their rules and their power made them safe. They thought humanity was weak because it did not answer violence with immediate, stupid violence. They were wrong. Jin went back to work, but not as a translator. She became a student. She buried herself in the embassy's data archives, not looking for trade agreements or cultural exchange programs. She studied the Cathar. She read everything she could find about their history, their politics, their society. She learned that their strength was not in their ships or their weapons, though they had many. Their true power, the thing that held their entire civilization together, was their idea of bloodline. Who you were born from decided everything: your job, your status, your honor. Their future leaders, their generals, their scientists, all were chosen because of their family history, recorded in a vast and supposedly perfect galactic database. It was their foundation. And Jin began to think about how to break it. She requested a private meeting with a man she had only heard whispers about. His name was Park, and he did not work in the embassy. His office was a small, plain room in a quiet part of the station, with no windows and a very strong lock on the door. Park was an older man with a calm face and watchful eyes. He listened without interruption as Jin spoke. She didn't talk about her pain. She talked about data. She talked about systems. She talked about the one thing the Cathar valued more than anything: their past. We cannot beat them in a fight, she said, her voice steady and low. But we don't have to. Their whole society is built on a story. A story about who they are and where they come from. What if that story is wrong? Park steepled his fingers. What are you proposing? We don't destroy their ships, Jin said, leaning forward. We destroy their reason for having them. We don't kill their leaders. We prove they have no right to lead. We erase their past. We make their future impossible. She laid out her idea. It was not a bomb. It was a lie. A carefully crafted, perfectly designed lie that would be inserted into the very records the Cathar trusted completely. Park was silent for a long time. He looked at Jin, not with pity, but with a calculating intensity. He saw the grief that had been refined into a weapon. He saw the brilliant, diplomatic mind now focused on a single, terrible goal. It is a dangerous idea, he said finally. If we are discovered, the consequences would be severe. They took my brother's life, Jin replied, her voice barely a whisper. What worse consequence is there? Park nodded slowly. He stood up and walked to a secure console. The operation will need a name. Jin didn't hesitate. Call it Operation Foundation. Park entered the name. The project was now real. The unsettling calm was over. The real work was about to begin. The room was not what Jin had expected. It was small, clean, and very cold. There were no windows. The only light came from the soft blue glow of several large data screens. This was the heart of Operation Foundation, a secret place on a station full of eyes and ears. 2 other people were already there. A young man named Lee sat at the main console, his fingers already dancing across the screen, pulling up maps of data routes. He didn't look like a soldier. He looked like someone who spent too much time in front of a computer. He nodded at Jin but didn't smile. The other was a woman named Sue. She had a calm face and was reading from a tablet, her eyes scanning pages of ancient Cathar history. She offered Jin a small, tired smile. They were the team. A hacker, a forger, and a translator who knew how to hurt an entire culture. Park was there too, watching. "We have one goal," he said, his voice quiet but clear. "We are not breaking anything. We are not stealing anything. We are editing." Lee took a deep breath. The Cathar keep their main bloodline records in the Galactic Archive. It's the most secure system in known space. It's not one computer, it's 1,000, all talking to each other, all checking each other for mistakes. You can't just hack in and change a file. The system would see the change and fix it instantly. He pointed to a complex diagram on the screen. But data moves. It gets copied for backups, for research, for official business. It travels. My job is to find one of those traveling copies. A ghost of the main data. I have to find it, isolate it, and let our change hitch a ride back home. The main system trusts its own copies. It won't question a file that appears to come from itself. It sounded impossible. Lee just cracked his knuckles. "It's a puzzle. I like puzzles." "And what do we change?" Park asked, looking at Sue. Sue put down her tablet. "We don't change battles or dates. That's too obvious. We change stories." She spoke like a teacher. "The Cathar value courage above all. So, we find a famous hero from their past. A great war leader, let's say. The records say he won a great battle because of his bravery." She leaned forward. "We don't say he lost. We say he was a coward. We create a lost report that says he hid during the fight. We say he only took credit after the real hero, a low-ranking soldier, was killed. We make it look real. The paper is old. The language is perfect." Jin understood immediately. It's not about the ancient hero. It's about every famous family today that claims to be descended from him. Their honor, their right to rule, it all disappears. They become liars. "Exactly," Sue said. "We plant a seed of shame that grows into a tree of doubt. We don't need to change everything. Just enough. One scandal here. One coward there. One marriage to a slave-class family in another. We break the links in their chain." Then everyone looked at Jin. "Her turn. The story can be perfect, but the words must be perfect too," she said. She sat next to Sue. "The Cathar language for history is formal. It uses old words, words not spoken anymore. If we use a modern word for coward, the system will know it's a fake. I have to find the right ancient word. The insult that would have been used then." She looked at Sue's draft story about the cowardly hero. "And it can't just be any insult. It has to be the worst one. The one that implies he betrayed his own bloodline. That's the only thing that would truly destroy a reputation." 4 days, they worked. Lee's side of the room was a mess of code and complex maps. He muttered to himself, trying path after path into the archive systems. Sue's side was covered in notes and historical texts. She was writing fiction, but it had to be believable fiction. She crafted lies that were more damaging than any truth. Jin sat between them, a dictionary in her mind. She read Sue's stories and then carefully, precisely, translated them into the harsh, formal language of the Cathar past. She chose every word like a surgeon choosing a scalpel, making sure each cut was deep and clean. Weeks turned into a month. The tension in the cold room grew. Then, one night, Lee let out a quiet hiss. "I'm in. A research vessel just requested a copy of the noble family records for a historical study. The data is moving. It's on a narrow channel. I can touch it." This was the moment. Sue handed Jin the final, perfected story of the cowardly hero. Jin had already translated it. It was ready. Lee created a tiny data packet. It didn't look like an attack. It looked like a small piece of forgotten information, a lost page from a logbook. He attached it to the traveling data like a parasite. "The copy will be delivered to the research ship," Lee whispered, his face lit by the screen. "Their system will check it, see it's from the archive, and accept it. Then, in 3 days, the ship's computer will sync back with the main archive to update its records. It will send our little ghost back home. The main archive will see the new data, check that it matches the format, and add it to the official history. It will think it found a missing piece." He pressed a final key. It's done. The packet is attached. It's on its way. They all sat back. There was no explosion. No alarm sounded. On the screen, a tiny line of light moved from one point to another, carrying a poison that was stronger than any bomb. The ghost was in the machine. Now, they could only wait and see what it would haunt. The change did not happen all at once. It began as a quiet ripple, a small error in the great river of Cathar life. On a research vessel near the edge of their space, a young scholar named Kavor was studying the history of his own clan. He was proud. His family line was old and respected, tracing back to the great war leader, Ragnar. He was reading the digital copies of ancient battle logs, cross-referencing dates, when he found it. A file he had never seen before. It was a personal log from a low-ranking soldier who served under Ragnar. The writing was old, the language difficult, but the meaning was clear. It described the famous Battle of Black Sand. The official story said Ragnar led a brave charge, turning the tide of the fight. This new log said something else. It said Ragnar hid in a supply ship, shaking with fear, while a common soldier named Vortek organized the defense. The log claimed Ragnar only came out when the fighting was over to take the credit. Kavor sat back, stunned. This could not be true. It was heresy. But the file was in the archive's own format. It had all the correct markers. It looked real. His first thought was that it was a mistake, a cruel joke. He reported it to his superior. His superior, an older Cathar, was annoyed. He checked the file. His annoyance turned to confusion, then to cold fear. The file was there, in the main database now. It had been verified by the system itself. He immediately sent a message to the High Council on the Cathar homeworld, marking it as urgent. This was the first thread pulled. On the homeworld, a powerful lord named Gortau was about to be named the new head of the military council. His claim was strong because his bloodline was pure, going back to another famous hero. But the night before the ceremony, a rival lord, desperate to stop him, did a deep search of the records. He found something. An old, overlooked marriage record. It showed that Gortau's great-great-grandmother was not from a noble family, as everyone believed. The records now clearly stated she was from the Tikar, a servant class considered too low to mix with noble blood. The record had always been there, the rival lord claimed. It had just been missed. The news spread like a virus. Gortau's appointment was frozen. His family was thrown into chaos. How could a leader with impure blood command the fleets? His honor was broken. This was the second thread. All across the Cathar Imperium, similar stories began to appear. A famous scientist was discovered to have an ancestor who was a known liar. A wealthy merchant family found their fortune was started not by trade, but by piracy, according to a newly discovered ship's manifest. Each scandal was small on its own, but together they created a storm of doubt. The Cathar's greatest strength became their greatest weakness. Their whole society was built on trust in these records. They had never needed to question them. Now, they could do nothing but question them. Arguments broke out in government meetings. Old alliances, based on centuries of shared history, fell apart because a new file suggested their shared ancestor was a criminal. Families turned on each other, accusing one another of having shameful blood. The military, the pride of the Imperium, was hit the hardest. Ship captains refused to take orders from commanders whose honor was now in question. Why should they follow a leader who might come from a line of cowards? A fleet near the border was supposed to patrol. Instead, it sat idle because the admiral and his second-in-command were now busy challenging each other's family history, each trying to prove the other was unfit to serve. The central government tried to regain control. They ordered the archive to be purged, to find the source of the errors. But Lee's ghost was too good. The lies were woven into the fabric of the data itself. To remove one, they might damage a true record. They didn't know what was real anymore. The very foundation of their truth had turned to sand. They were not being attacked by ships or soldiers. They were being attacked by an idea. The idea that everything they knew about themselves was a lie. There was no enemy to fight. There was no battle to win. The chaos was everywhere and nowhere. The strong, proud Cathar Imperium began to crumble from the inside. Great houses closed their doors, trusting no one. Trading stopped. Fleets were recalled to home systems, not to defend against an outside threat, but to watch their rivals next door. The galactic community watched in silent shock. They saw a mighty civilization tripping over its own feet, falling apart without a single shot being fired. A strange, new fear began to grow. The humans had not declared war. They had not even accused the Cathar of anything. They had just let them fall. The Cathar had been so worried about protecting their borders from outside threats. They never thought to protect their past from a ghost. Their future, once so certain and bright, was being unraveled one thread at a time. 10 years passed. The noisy, chaotic trading station of Xylos 7 was quieter now. The Cathar were rarely seen. When they were, they moved quickly, their heads down, their proud hissing voices now low and cautious. They were a broken people, their great imperium shattered into 100 squabbling factions, each one clinging to a tiny piece of their broken history. Jin stood on the observation deck of a new human station. It was clean and bright, a symbol of humanity's growing, if cautious, place in the galaxy. She looked out at the stars, not really seeing them. The view was a backdrop for her thoughts. The memory of Minute was not a sharp pain anymore. It was a dull, permanent ache, a part of her she had learned to live with, like a missing limb. She had gotten older. Her face was a little harder, her eyes a little quieter. She had a new job, a quiet one, helping to translate ancient texts. It was peaceful work. The door to the deck hissed open. A young aide, a human woman with a nervous expression, walked in. She held a data pad like it was a hot piece of metal. "Ms. Jin," the aide said, her voice too loud in the quiet room. "I'm sorry to bother you." Jin didn't turn. "It's fine. There's a message. For the diplomatic corps. But they thought you should see it. Given your history." The aide held out the pad. Jin finally turned. She took the pad. On the screen was a formal communication. It was from the remnant council of the Cathar bloodlines. The language was not proud or demanding. It was the careful, desperate language of beggars. They begged for help. They described the chaos, the fighting, the loss of all they had. They said their records were sick, filled with a disease of lies they could not cure. They had heard rumors. Rumors that humans had a talent for information. They did not accuse. They pleaded. They asked, if it was within human power, for the original, uncorrupted data to be restored. They asked for their history back. They asked for their future. Jin read the message twice. She felt nothing. No joy. No victory. The words were just words. She handed the pad back to the aide. The aide shifted her weight. "The council is considering the request. They want to know your opinion. You were there at the start, after all." Jin looked back out at the stars. She saw Min's face, not as he was when he died, but as a boy, laughing, holding up a weird bug he had found. She saw the Cathar Lord, Torval, wiping his blade clean. She heard his final, dismissive words. The aide waited, unsure. "They took one life," Jin said. Her voice was flat, empty of feeling. It was not a shout of triumph. It was a simple statement of fact, heavy and final. She turned her head just enough to look at the aide. The cold fire that had kept her going for so long was now just ashes. "We took their future." She paused, letting the weight of those words hang in the air between them. "The matter is concluded." The aide opened her mouth to say something, then thought better of it. She just nodded, turned, and left quickly, the door sighing shut behind her. Jin was alone again with the endless stars. She had won. Humanity had won without firing a single shot. They had shown the galaxy a new kind of strength, a terrifying one. They were now respected, and feared. But standing there, Jin did not feel like a winner. She felt empty. The balance was restored, as the Cathar would say. A life for a future. But as she looked into the infinite blackness, she knew some debts could never truly be paid. They just left a hole that nothing could ever fill. The silence was her answer. It was the only one she had left.